Welcome to Pacific Mammal Research's Marine Mammal Highlight Series. We are a 501c3 research and education nonprofit studying marine mammals in the Salish Sea off Washington State. In this series, you will learn about different marine mammals as we discuss interesting facts about each species. This is our way to geek out, share some information, and have some fun. We hope you enjoy the series, and be sure to follow us on Instagram to vote for which animal we talk about next. And without further ado, welcome to the PacMam podcast. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kat.
And this week was a marine mammal highlight, and I finally got the poll up. Instagram was being difficult once again, but I was able to figure something out, and I got the poll up, and it was decided. It was a very decidedly concrete winning by the
you guys knew what you wanted to hear about, which is great.
And I kind of suspected it, honestly, because the rough-toothed dolphin, like, it looks kind of funny. It's got this, like, pink, like, you'll talk about it, but it's got some interesting coloration. It's rough-toothed dolphin. Like, what does that mean? So, yeah, I kind of said over the climbing, which, it's cool, but, like, I could see why.
I think a lot of people may have heard of the rough-toothed dolphin, too. Yeah. And, not a lot of people may have heard of the climbing dolphin. So,
Exactly. I think it all played into it. So, well done, everybody, though. You picked a rough tooth, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, then, we will get right into it. And Kat will start off with what they look like, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. So before we get into what these guys look like, let's talk about where they live. So these are mostly found through the tropical and warmer temperate waters. So technically they have a worldwide distribution, but they're mostly found in the kind of Western Pacific to Mediterranean belt. So it's, I saw a couple of sources that were saying they're rarely seen north of 40 degrees latitude or south of 35 degrees latitude. So it kind of, they have like a little bit of a band.
A belly band.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the real distribution is not super well known, which is, I think, going to be a little bit of a theme. They have been seen around the Atlantic coast of the US, in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Mediterranean Sea, the Eastern Tropical Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. So again, they've been seen in quite a few different places, but I don't think we have a great handle on what the real distribution is. So it's a pretty kind of generalized belt.
I think there's patches of places that they're well known, and then outside of that, it's unknown. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what do they look like? So these guys are kind of a small to mid-sized dolphin. They range in size from about 6.9 to 9 feet in length and weigh between about 200 to 340 pounds. The males are larger than the females, so it's a pretty big size range. I think on average, it's kind of around about the 7 feet and around about 200-ish pounds. So kind of on the smaller end is average.
Yeah, they're kind of slender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I think that, there's a couple chunkier animals that may have been seen, but for the most part, they're a slightly smaller size of dolphin.
If you heard squeaking behind me, I'm sorry. That's my puppy who was playing with a squeaky toy.
Actually, couldn't hear anything.
Oh, good.
Well, it's funny what translates on. Yeah.
That's what it was.
If there's random squeaking, it's not a dolphin.
That's right. Although I do have a stuffed animal that does actually squeak. So
that's true. That's true. Okay, so these guys have a small head with a long rostrum or beak, but they're the only long-beaked dolphin to have no real demarcation between where the forehead ends and where the beak begins. So it's a very sort of sloping melon or forehead and then into the rostrum. This leads to them having what has been referred to as a prehistoric look, or a couple of sources actually said reptilian.
Look at the picture and I was like, yep.
They're not wrong. No. They're not wrong. I was like, oh, that's kind of mean. And then I was looking at some pictures and I'm like, no, that's actually pretty accurate. So they are kind of an unusual looking dolphin. They look quite different to other species.
And when we were talking about it yesterday, I was like, to me, they're kind of like the intermediary between a river dolphin and a marine dolphin, right?
Yes.
So it's very prehistoric and river and regular dolphin species right in the middle. That's kind of where they're at, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they have this small head, like I said, longer beak, but a very kind of sloping forehead. The beak itself is often white, but can have some light pink mixed in there too. The rest of the body is mostly a dark gray. So they do have a narrow, darker cape kind of running down the back between the blowhole and the dorsal fin. And then the underside often has some white or lighter spots or blotches. That's a good word.
Splotches. I mean, that's what I would have said. Splotches.
Technically, splotches. So they have also seen some piebald animals, so where they have larger than normal patches of white on their darker skin.
Mm-hmm.
And older individuals do have more distinctive pink, yellow, or white markings around the mouth and on the underside. So that does seem to be an indication of age. If you have more of those splotches on you, you might be an older animal. They have a distinctively large dorsal fin and pec fins, which is, I saw in like every source I looked up, this said that this was a characteristic trait of the species. So having a larger dorsal fin and pec fins is apparently like one of the IDing marks for this species.
So I'm looking at it, and the dorsal fin I definitely see. That one is bigger. The pec fins don't really look that much larger to me in comparison, but the dorsal fin does.
Yeah, the dorsal fin, and I think it's one of those where maybe if you're seeing it in context of the whole animal, especially with that smaller head, it probably just looks a little bit more disproportionate.
It does look like I have a tiny head.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like the small head is really the more obvious thing. And then, but you may not see the full head coming out of the water necessarily.
Right. Although interesting how they surface. You might.
Ooh, okay. I didn't look into any of that. Fun. Okay. The dorsal fin itself is only slightly hooked or falcate. So it's a little bit more of a triangular fin than some dolphin species. So all in all, these guys are pretty distinctive, but they can be mistaken for some other kind of more tropical species of dolphins. So I did see a couple places where they said like they can be at a glance confused with spinner dolphins, for example. If you don't see a lot of the animal, I could see how that might be the case if you saw the dorsal fin only and just a dark back. Yeah. So that's there are a couple they might be confused with if you don't get a great look at them or if you're farther away. And then there's the teeth. So obviously these guys are called rough-toothed dolphins. So why? Um, they are named after their peculiar teeth. So each tooth, and they have 20 to 27 teeth, each tooth is ridged or wrinkled and has scratch marks on the surface. So I don't know why. I'm not sure why. Are you going to talk about it?
Yes. In the new research. Yes.
Awesome. I was like, I hope that Cindy's going to tell me why in relation to like diet and behavior or new research. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay.
Yeah, no, not even necessarily. Yeah, a little bit about that, but yeah, more about like how it got to be, like what it is. Yeah.
Oh, so cool. Okay. All right. So we'll put a pin in the teeth.
But they are rough.
But they are rough. They do have rough teeth. So this is not one of those weird animals where they're named something that has nothing to do with any of their actual features, which is quite satisfying because sometimes we do talk about ones where it's like, why are they called that? I don't really know. But yeah, so that's what they look like. Like I said, the most distinctive factors are really, again, that large dorsal fin, the small head, and the sloping forehead.
If you look at their face, it looks like an alligator. Like
it, yeah, and that's where I get reptilian, where it's like I do see they have a slightly smaller eye as well than some other dolphin species, so I think that also kind of contributes to it as well. But yeah, they're cool looking.
Yeah, no, the eye I think about it as like a evil reptile, like in a not evil, but like the mean guy in a cartoon where he's like smiling like this and he's got the big thing.
Right, got like the little small eyes.
The whole face looks like that.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll go with prehistoric. That's a little more PC.
An evil reptile.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll save the I have some fun facts about their Latin name. But we'll save that till the end.
Cool. Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, so sorry, every time I go away in the picture, it's because I'm going to try to grab the squeaker toy to throw it somewhere else so that Elsa, my puppy, stops doing it right here. Anyway. Quite a bit of this is like because of that patchy distribution of there's certain populations we know fairly well, and then everywhere else we kind of don't. So we'll be kind of talking that, and so there's some things that we know pretty a lot about, and then there's other stuff that we like don't. And there's actually quite a bit that we don't. They're not a well-studied dolphin species, even though they're in the tropics, but they are more deep water. So
yeah, that's what I was wondering because it's typically in the deeper areas, so it's harder to research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So starting off with the diet, so this will kind of set the tone for the rest of everything. There was one website that said the details of diet are sketchy.
Nice.
It's like,
I mean, at least they're truthful.
that's right. I mean, it's a good description of how it is, but I've never seen it said like that before, and I loved it. So basically they're like, they eat squid and fish.
Okay.
I was like, all right, well, that really, we don't have anything else? We do. It's a really wide variety, so they don't seem to be super picky. So they will eat squid and octopus, different types of fish, particularly large fish that live at the surface, and which we'll talk about in a minute with their behavior, like mahi-mahi, or otherwise known as dorado. They will also eat houndfish, smelt, squids, and octopuses. Others that were noted were silversides, sauries, cutlass fish, large head hairtail, caston leatherjack, mullet, ballyhoo, halfbeak, sharksucker, Atlantic needlefish, guachanche, barracuda, and bluefish. There's,
I mean, this kind of makes sense though, given that wide, like patchy but wide distribution,
yeah,
right? Where like certain species are not going to be found in all parts of the world that they live in.
exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
And they're not super picky, right? And you probably, and like especially in the tropics, you can't be, because like it's not as plentiful in food and resources as other areas. So and those last few I'll talk about in the new research, because that's where I got some of that information.
Okay.
But a lot of it is, again, yeah, it's like, oh well, these guys we know here, well, we know they eat this because we either saw them eat it, or there are strandings and stomach contents, or bycatch. A lot of the stuff we know does come from strandings or bycatch, because we just don't know as much. But those ones were specifically, they observed them doing it, and I'll talk about how they're doing that in the new research, because cool. Yes.
Fun.
So I found this on one website, say for behavior. And I've noted there's no explanation as to why, because they have large brains and are believed to be one of the most intelligent dolphin species.
Oh.
Why? Have no idea. Because all dolphins have large brains. They're all pretty smart. Why are these guys more specific, especially since we don't really know much about them? Is it just based on the fact that they have, is it, I don't even know if it's larger brains compared to other dolphin species. They just said large brains. So
I mean, there are some in captivity, so maybe they've done studies on them in captivity,
that would be
perhaps in
very,
comparison,
there's not
but
that many. There's the couple
no.
I saw at the one aquarium. And so basing that kind of statement on just a couple.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I mean, like, bottlenose dolphins are really gosh darn smart. They learn sign language, and they know like 100 different words, and they know syntax, like, I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I was like,
yeah,
okay, cool, maybe they are. So these guys are interesting. So we don't know a lot about them, but we actually know a fair amount about their social structure. And a lot of this comes from Cascadia Research Collective and Robin Baird, who studies them down in Hawaii. Yeah.
Nice.
But it's on other places it said seemingly strong social structure. So again, we know some stuff, but we really don't know a ton. Let me see. So they're in tight knit groups of about 10 to 20, rarely in groups of up to 100. And oftentimes, if you see those, there are smaller subgroups. So I kind of think that's similar to the large harbor porpoise aggregations we see, right? They're smaller groups, but they may all come together in a larger area, whatever. Interestingly, in Hawaii, they're in smaller groups of an average of 3 with a median of 7. So depending on the population, maybe smaller or larger, but somewhere between 3 and 20 is more of an average group size. But they have been seen in groups as large as 140 and 170 near Hawaii and in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
So they have these larger groupings occasionally. But are they only occasional? Are they more common than we think? Just like harbor porpoises, right?
Yeah.
Didn't think that they were very common, but actually when you're out there looking, they are. And I don't think we just have enough people out there looking at these guys. For their other associations, they are often associated with other cetaceans. And I got different dolphin and whale species from a couple different websites, so I just put them all in here. But short-fin pilot whales, Fraser's dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, pantropical spotted dolphins, spinner dolphins, false killer whales, humpback whales, and also I'll tell you about a melon-headed whale in the new research.
Ooh.
So yeah, they seem to love everybody. Just hanging. So and with the social structure too, again, with the new research, I'll explain a little bit more about that, but it does seem like there are long-lasting familial relationships.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So there are likely, I don't know if anybody's done, like a SOC-prog or SOC-prog analysis of association patterns, but it does seem that they have some strong associations that are not just mother-calf, or
Okay.
at least mother-calf during the time that the calf is dependent, right? Past dependency. So when they are at the surface, so they can dive up to 15 minutes, or for at least 15 minutes, sorry. They will, where did I find that? Oh, I didn't put that in the story. There's some, I was hard to differentiate between what I put in the regular and what I put in the new research, because a lot of the stuff has been really recent that they've
got it.
So they do, I'll do a little bit more in the new research, but they do seem to follow the prey as they're coming up from deeper up to the shallower waters.
Okay.
So they can dive a bit deep, but they're not diving deeper. They're waiting for them to come up.
Got it.
They don't have to dive quite as long. And they swim at a slow to moderate speed. So specifically in consideration with other dolphins, they're not fast swimmers, they said.
Okay.
And they actually will skim the surface and keeping in close together in tight formation and making distinctive splashes when they're there. So that was what I was saying. You actually might see their heads because they're actually like skimming the surface of the water rather than regular kind of diving, which is not
right, kind of rolling dives. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, you think of other larger whale species like baleen whale species that do skim feeding at the surface, but these guys apparently just kind of like cruise a little bit at the surface. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. So you might get to see their reptilian face. And then so the daytime, they listed one here. Their daytime activities include traveling and hunting, which makes sense. And the movement is dictated by prey availability. So again, if you're living in those tropics, you're going to have to follow the prey because it's oftentimes in patchy distributions.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that with the new research. They are not as agile as other dolphins, but they will leap and occasionally are known to ride bow waves and stuff. So they still will play a bit, but they're not as agile and flashy and
kind of boisterous as some other dolphins. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at them, you go, they look kind of reptilian. Like, it's like, oh, would you see an alligator doing that? I don't think so. Like, they don't look like they're like this svelte, the streamline. They're not quite as, even though they're slim, you're talking about, it's still, they just don't look as slim and agile as some of the other dolphin species do. For sure. Because that's apparently not what they do. Do you have were you going to talk about lifespan?
Nope.
Okay.
Go for it.
Because usually when I look in reproduction, they also talk about lifespan. They can live up to 36 years or more. So if 36, that's kind of the lower end of dolphin species, but if more, then it's kind of average 40, 50 years. It's pretty standard. They're sexually mature at 10 to 14. And then I had conflicting information on other websites. So anywhere from maybe 6 to 10 for females. And then males were 14, like 10 to 14. But then I had one that said 5 to 10 for males. So
oh, wow. That's like a very different estimate.
Yeah. So some were saying like it was 10 for female and 14 for male. And then we had these other ranges. So honestly, I don't really think we know. Or I don't know which one of those is the correct one to reference. But and if they're living 40, 50 years, it's probably, up in the upper digits, like 8, 9, 10 is probably like unknown gestation. No idea.
Oh, okay.
And little else is known about the reproduction.
Which again, deep water species is not surprising, right? Where it's like trying to track animals to figure out when they're giving birth is hard anyway in the marine world. And then never mind when they're an offshore species where it's like being out there is so infrequent that like, it's hard to know.
Exactly. Especially with seasons, like a lot of times winter is not the time you can be out there. And if they're in the tropics, they may be having babies in the winter because it's still warm there, So it's just harder weather-wise to be able to get out in those more open waters for sure. So that's what I have, what we know and don't know about these apparently large-brained, maybe the most smartest species of dolphin. So with that, we will take a quick break and then come back with the status and threats and all the new research that we've put little pins in throughout the intro here. There is some. This was actually one of the more exciting ones of new research. That I was like, this is interesting. So, kind of exciting. But we will get to that when we take after a quick break. All right, we are back. So, Kat, let's tell us about the status as we know it.
Yeah, as you guys might have figured out, we don't know. Yeah, so the worldwide population is unknown at this point. Most research has been conducted in the Eastern Pacific in terms of population estimates that I could find. So there was a population estimate of 150,000 made in the 1980s, and that was in the Eastern Pacific. But from what I could see on like the NOAA website and anywhere else that would have like these stock updates, we don't have any more recent updates than that.
1980s,
in terms of
40 years ago.
I know. It's like the early 1980s. It's like, okay, cool. So we don't know.
Yeah.
In the US waters, according to NOAA stock assessments, and I believe the last one was in 2018, I want to say, there's approximately 6,900 rough-toothed dolphins in US waters. And a couple different stocks that they are separated into, but really we don't know. Anywhere around about 100,000 to 150,000 is what we're, maybe upwards of that, but basically we don't know, which is tricky. So, and it's tricky, especially when we get into the threats here. So entanglement is thought to be one of the main sources of mortality for these guys. They are very prone to entanglement in commercial fishing gear, such as gill nets, drift nets, purse seines, and I'll get to this in a second, but there are also drive fisheries that still happen for rough-toothed dolphins outside of the US. Yeah, which I'll get to in a second.
Interesting. I did see some in mine where when they were talking about like the food in the stomach and stuff, some of those were from bycatch. So it definitely was a more common thing than on.
Yeah. And so, I mean, basically what I was finding was that there's no officially reported bycatch of rough-toothed dolphins in US fisheries. Doesn't necessarily mean that's that means just reported. They are known, however, to take bait from active fisheries in Hawaii. So if they're actively interacting with the fishermen, if they're going and taking the bait off the lines, or they're going and taking the bait out of whatever fishing net is being baited and thrown down, you're going to be more at risk for entanglement.
Yeah, there's quite a few species that's a lot of what they do, what Robin Bear does down there too, is document those interactions.
Yeah, exactly. So entanglement is a big issue. And then, like I said, they are still actively hunted. So in Japan, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Western Africa, and the Caribbean Sea, they are still actively hunted. Now, again, this isn't necessarily like this is the only targeted dolphin. This is kind of like we're hunting dolphins. And these happen to be some of the ones that are caught in that process. But there is active hunting of these animals still going on. Now, I tried to find like numbers of how many are taken each year. Couldn't find them.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not putting those out.
Well, and even if they are, they're in countries that we don't necessarily have good access to those records or those details. So I'm not sure what type of extraction from the overall population is happening from hunting. It sounds like it's not a ton. But obviously, if we don't have good numbers on that and we don't have good numbers on their population, that's not a good mix.
Yeah, because I mean, say the population is really, really low. Well, okay, they're not taking a ton, but that in percentage wise and relation wise, it's a lot and it's not sustainable, right?
Versus exactly.
I didn't realize there were so many that do that. Like, I know
they still hunt them.
Big ones, but like that's a lot more than I thought actually did dry fisheries still.
Well, and I think not all of them are dry fisheries. Like some of them I know in Western Africa, like they're going and harpooning the animals. So that might be more like very individualized, like they're in this area and I see a couple and I'm just going to take them,
Right.
So as we've spoken about for many other species, increasing ocean noise is a concern, especially because they are in more of those offshore waters. So they are at risk for like, more shipping, and like especially kind of like transcontinental shipping. That's a big challenge for these guys. Communication and foraging can be impeded by this, can even be completely prevented. And as we've spoken about in many other podcasts, once you do that, you basically are challenging every way that they function in the environment, right? They need to be able to hear the echoes from their echolocation clicks to be able to forage correctly. They have to be able to communicate with one another acoustically, listen for predation, all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and they're very social. So,
yeah.
And actually, one of the papers I'll talk about the research is in a seismic area survey, like in relation to that. So.
Okay. Yeah. So again, put a pin in that one too. And then, like we said at the beginning, a few of these animals are actually still held in captivity. So there is a couple in Hawaii and Florida, and there are also some in aquariums in China and Japan. So again, active catching for captivity is not that common anymore, but there are still some that are in captivity, and obviously, depending on the quality of conditions there, that can be challenging for the animals to survive well in captivity. So that's kind of an interesting one as well.
Yeah, and there was one, I think it was Clearwater, which is
Clearwater is the other one in Florida.
Yeah, so that one, those two were rescues. So I know that's not always that they're being captured for. These ones rescues deemed that they couldn't be released. So.
Yeah, good clarification on that.
Yeah, and I know one of them just passed. That's what or at least actually I was trying to figure out what the date was, but there was no date on the announcement. It just said this happened this week, and I was like, okay, well, what week is this? I don't
Interesting.
know. Yeah, so they already had a rough-toothed dolphin, and they said, given that socialization plays a crucial role in promoting optimal social development and reducing stress, she would be an ideal partner for her other rough-toothed dolphin named Rudy. So it was Rudy and Rex, I believe. And then Rex passed away sometime. I don't know when, but
interesting.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, some of them are rescues that can't be released, and others are caught.
Yeah, so that's what we have for threats. So,
and it's also interesting too because these are oceanic. It's interesting that they are. I hate the word suitable, but that they adapt well to captivity.
They survive.
Yeah, they survive captivity. Whereas an oceanic dolphin, I think, is going to have a much harder time than one that's coastal, just in terms of habitat and what they do. So it's interesting that they can adapt to that. So
yeah, I mean, I guess if they're not diving super deep in their normal life, like it's a transition, but it's not necessarily preventing their normal behavior in terms of foraging activities. But yeah, it's it's kind of curious. I agree.
Maybe it's because they're so smart they can figure things out because they're smarter than every other dolphin. I'm just so fascinated by that. But okay, so that's what you got for the.
That's what we got for threats. Yep.
Excellent. So on to the new research. I'm trying to figure out. There's quite a few. How I want to go through these. Do you want to hear about the rough tooth?
I want to hear about the teeth.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me do that one first. So super interesting. This was by Huang et al. And this was in the PubMed. Genome provides insights into genetic mechanism of rough teeth.
So, okay.
Yes. So the rough-toothed dolphin is characterized by having teeth covered in finely wrinkled vertical ridges, which is a general manifestation of amylogenesis imperfect, a group of rare inherited disorders characterized by abnormal enamel formation. So it's actually like a genetic defect. Yeah.
What? But it's in the entire population.
Yeah. Yes. And so what's funny is when you looked up, I was like, what the heck is amylogenesis imperfecta? I looked it up, and of course there's human teeth that they're using for the pictures for that, not rough tooth. So it's hypothesized to be an evolutionary morphological trait of feeding adaptation to increase the dolphin's grip on prey.
Oh, but then how come other dolphins don't have that?
I don't know. The genes related to enamel development or dental diseases have undergone diverse adaptive changes. that may shape the special enamel morphology of this dolphin species, including positive selection and rapid evolution, or unique amino acid substitutions. And they have all these like letters and numbers, and I don't know how to read those because I don't know what they mean. But and they found that there's genome-wide heterozygosity. So heterozygotes mean that you have two different alleles, right? And that is generally a good healthy thing, because the more genetic variation you have, the more adaptable you are to changes, because somebody in the population is going to have something good for the changing environment. But the heterozygosity of this dolphin species is in the middle of all published data for cetaceans. And then, although the population is considerable, there may be population or subspecies differentiation, which then will lead me to my next new research. So anyway, they're looking at the genome, and apparently it's like a genetic defect that is stayed in this entire population to have weird.
Because it was beneficial.
Yep. For whatever species they're eating. Yeah.
Huh. That's wild.
Yes. So then I'll go into the subspecies, and then I'll go into what they're eating. So let's see, where is it? Here we go. So let me highlight this, make sure I know I've gone over it. Okay. Now, this is Albertson et al. 2022. And the Huang et al. I think was, I forget about the date, but I think it was either 2021 or 2022. It's pretty recent.
Very recent.
Yeah. So this is Albertson et al. 2022, evidence of subspecies delimitation. And so this kind of references back to our killer whale episode. So if you didn't listen to the last episode, please do. It's all about subspecies and species differentiation. So they looked at sequences from the mitochondrial DNA control region, the mitogenomes, and 6 nuclear introns to provide multiple lines of evidence to critically evaluate the potential taxonomic status of the species. They looked at the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans. We examined the null hypothesis that rough-toothed dolphins are one panmictic species. So that means they're all one species from one, common ancestor. And the alternate hypothesis of oceanic subspecies, so that the subspecies are at the ocean level, right? So the ones in the Pacific versus Indian.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they're not looking fine-tuned within those, but the bigger picture. So they determined that the Atlantic rough-toothed dolphins could be correctly diagnosed with 98% accuracy with their mitochondrial DNA. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. And calculated the net nucleotide divergence of 0.02. Don't know what that means, but that's what they did. Population level analysis revealed that there was significant genetic differentiation using the mitochondrial DNA among most regions, and while significant differentiation using nuclear markers occurred only between the Atlantic and the Indian/Pacific regions. So again, the multiple lines of evidence, like we talked about in the killer whale, they're looking at mitochondrial and nuclear DNA, and they both showed that basically, regardless of further internal differentiations, you can tell a difference between the Atlantic and a Pacific/Indian Ocean section. Interesting. So the oceanic divergence and diagnosability of the rough-toothed dolphins in the Atlantic and the Indian/Pacific meet the proposed criteria as to subspecies. Yeah. So that was 2022, and theoretically, the Society for Marine Mammalogy should have looked at those last year. So I didn't have time to look up to see if they actually did do that, but I don't think they
didn't see anything. Yeah. Huh.
So interesting that it's out there. So who knows? Maybe they'll do it at some point, but the genetics shows that they should be different, which is interesting. So then onto that, since the teeth and this genetics have to do with feeding, there is evidence of food sharing.
Ooh, cool.
This is by Ramos et al. In 2020. And this was, actually forgot. Oh, this is off the Pacific coast of Guerrero, Mexico. So their observations and the previous reports in other places of rough-toothed dolphin foraging indicate they regularly target smaller prey and then cooperatively hunt to herd the fish schools and to feed on numerous fish at the same time for individual. So they're herding together.
That's smart.
Thus, food sharing in the species may have evolved as a tactic to improve food intake when targeting large and unpredictable prey. Again, patchy distribution in the tropics. And as a means to reinforce social relationships between individuals, right? Again, so it's likely they have these stronger social ties because they're, also cooperatively feeding, right? It's another indication that they do. And for example, they observed dolphins engaging in a variety of socio-sexual behaviors during feeding and food sharing. It's unclear how
Oh,
sexual behavior may be related to feeding, but we oftentimes see this where they just get all excited, dolphins in general, and they feed and then have sex and then feed again. You know, it's a thing. So I'm going to describe the figure that they had in there that we're showing
ooh,
what's happening. So
interesting.
these are images of rough-toothed dolphins and the different behaviors they exhibited during aerial video observations gathered on January 15th, 2020 with the DJI Mavic Pro 2, so a drone. I love the names in here. Moby carried the prey fish at the beginning of the observation, and Fuji, Blue, and Pickles directionally swam. Yes, I love it. That's my favorite. Like, I love your names. They directionally swam nearby, so they were swimming in. Moby then fed, dropped the fish, and Fuji picked it up and fed. Then both feeding dolphins repeatedly grabbed the prey fish, jerked their heads to tear a piece off of the flesh, and then ate the piece while opening and closing its mouth. Moby and Fuji passed the fish back and forth between them again. Blue and Pickles did not engage in feeding or food sharing behaviors. Moby consumed the remainder of the fish, and Pickles and Moby engaged in socio-sexual behaviors with Fuji. And then the smaller inset image shows Pickles' extruded piece. So it was very obvious what was happening.
Interesting.
So they're food sharing, which is an interesting thing. So they're, again, that social aspect, it's likely that they have some pretty strong ties. You don't generally share food with somebody you don't like.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. And then maybe they're, these rough tooth teeth, they're helping them. And if they're ripping pieces rather than swallowing whole, like the dolphin species are, it would make sense that they would need those rougher teeth.
Yeah.
Or they would be beneficial. Maybe not need it, but okay, let's see. Which one do I want to do next? Those are both social. So along with diet, Schaff and Baird in 2021 looked at diel and lunar variation in diving behavior. So diving for foraging was lowest during the day and dawn, and this is again in Hawaii. Anytime you hear Baird, that's going to be Hawaii. They have a relatively well-known rough-toothed dolphin, one that they've been looking at for almost 2 decades now. So the dives were lowest during the day and dawn, and then highest at dusk and night. They were also deeper and longer at dusk.
Okay.
Suggesting that dolphins take advantage of the prey rising to the surface in response to the reduced light levels. So the deep scattering layer, I'm assuming. The lunar phase indirectly affects that with deeper and longer dives happening with increasing illumination. So they're coming up when it's less light, and then when it's like a full moon, they're having to dive deeper because the prey isn't coming up as far.
Okay. That makes sense.
So they shift their behavior and dive patterns with the distribution of the prey, which has to do with illumination and the moon. If they're doing it since they're mainly doing it at night. So, and I think they will do, hunt during the day too, but I think it's a more common.
Right, kind of preference, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that is that. So then I've got 2 more here, I think. 1, 2. Oh no, I have 3. Just kidding. So I'm going to go to this one that also has feeding in it. This is Cardoso et al. 2019, and this goes back to your anomalously pigmented individuals.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes. So they had ones with weird pigmentation and then described social and feeding behaviors off Brazil. So they did also see cooperative foraging. They had synchronized swimming in circles, diving, and changed direction, and then also tail slapping occurring. They also saw tail slapping in a more social context. And so this was like a note basically saying these crazy things we saw. Their foraging diet. So from this paper alone is where we found out the large head hairtail, the casted leatherjack, the mullet, the ballyhoo halfbeak, the short sucker, the Atlantic needlefish, and the guachanche, barracuda, and bluefish. So those are from, I think, visual observations of them seeing them eat that. And this was the first white rough-toothed dolphin in Brazilian waters that they. So there have been quite a few different ones, as you said, piebald, and either leucistic or some kind of anomalously white pigmented animal. These guys had light gray coloration, slightly showing the characteristic dorsal cape, that darker cape we have on top. And the eyes, forehead, dorsal fin, and rostrum were darker than the rest of the body. And so they suggested that it was leucism instead of
albinism.
Albinism, yes. There
Yep.
we go. This is seen in other populations as well. There's quite a few that they listed that were leucistic, and they were adults and seemingly doing fine. So even if there are issues with, getting sunburned or other possible, predators might be able to see you better, doesn't seem to be too bad for survival in this case.
That's good.
So, yeah. So definitely, all this new research is kind of reaffirming that there's social ties, there's crop foraging, there's reasons why we're seeing these things. So the last things I have are going back to Baird, and this population they've been studying for a long time. So I'll start off with which one do you want to start off with? Actually, I'll start with this one. So they have been studying these since at least 2003. So basically 20 years. This one is Baird et al. In 2021, and this is from inside a paper that was talking about odontocetes in Pacific Missile Range Facility, February 2020. So I had a whole bunch of different species, but I just took out the rough-toothed dolphin part. So again, confirming those group sizes from 1 to 22, and I did see that although they're normally found in groups, it's not weird to see one by itself like they do.
Okay.
Whereas other dolphin species, that is kind of weird. They had 3 encounters. Oh, so this is where they had 3 encounters with a single melon-headed whale. And one photographed individual was always photographed next to the melon-headed whale. And it was matched to a rough-toothed dolphin melon-headed whale hybrid documented off Kauai in August 2017.
So wait, so the melon-headed whale was a hybrid?
Well, the melon-head, the hybrid was always photographed next to the melon-headed whale.
Oh, I see. Okay, but the hybrid looked more like a rough-toothed dolphin.
I don't know. They didn't actually say that.
Oh, okay.
I guess they did, because they're like, it was with the rough-toothed dolphin group, and then there was this one melon-headed whale, and the one that was like with the rough-toothed dolphin group was a hybrid, right?
Weird.
Yeah. So I'm assuming then it would have been the melon-headed male would have been the.
I was gonna say, because typically if it was the mother, then the mother that's what the hybrid would be with that group, with the mom.
And the last research I have is about exactly that. So this is all working out really well. Yeah.
Weird.
Why would so then you would think like, oh, maybe that melon-headed whale is the mom, but it wouldn't be, because it would be the father.
Typically, right? For what we know of how they connect.
So maybe this melon-headed whale is just like, hey, you look kind of funny, you look kind of familiar, or maybe I know you. I don't know. So super interesting. So there are a hybrid between rough-toothed dolphins and melon-headed whales. So which is also kind of funny, is why that species wasn't listed in all the groups that they're hanging out with.
Yeah.
And they obviously did, because they had a baby together.
Weird.
Okay. So then there's a couple different populations around like Kauai and Oahu and Niihau. I don't know. It's Niihau. I don't know how to say that one.
Yahoo?
Yahoo. Yeah, that's probably right.
I guess.
Kauai, Niihau, and Oahu. 23 of 20 individuals that were photo identified had been ID'd off Kauai previously, and 1 off Kauai and Oahu. 6 were seen in 1 previous year, 7 in 2 previous years, 5 in 3 previous years, and 6 in 5 previous years. And 4 were ID'd over 10 years ago. So stable populations they're staying in this area, right?
Yeah.
And all but 2 individuals were linked to the main cluster of dolphins off Kauai, Niihau, and Oahu. So again, there's 2 weirdos that they don't know where they came from, but the rest of them are basically in these populations that are resident in that area.
Interesting.
Which again is interesting, because oceanic dolphins tend to not be as site specific, right? So
yeah.
So these guys are. So then the last thing I have, which links back to this whole mother-kid thing. This is, and I was kind of sad to see that this was in 2019. But it was a conference poster, which I'm not sad about that. I'm sad that there's no further paper done on it. Right? It's just the conference poster. So this is long-term mom calf associations between 2003 and 2018. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, they had 5 moms and 16 calves over that time period. On average, the moms were seen on average 11 years of time. Some shorter, some longer than that. They had 3 to 4 calves each with an average of 3. The intercalf interval was 3.8, ranging from 3 to 7.5 years. And the mom-calf association was about 4.2 years, ranging between 4 and 9.9.
Wow.
Long time with the mom.
Interesting.
And so that's similar to other dolphin species, like 3 to 4 years is common for like, bottlenose dolphins and spotted dolphins and things like that. But what's fascinating and goes back to this is that hybrid with the rough-toothed dolphin mother. Older calves remained in association even after new calves were observed, often traveling with the new calf between them.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Little,
Interesting.
brother and sisters are
Little
hanging
family.
out. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So, that's my dog barking in the background, if you can hear that. I'll try to do that. It's Wednesday. There's lots of trucks and deliveries and people working on our house. So it's fun. But there was differ by sex. So and granted, this is only a few individuals, so take it with, the grain of salt that we have. They had 2 male calves that they documented that remained associated up to 7.6 years with the mothers, and either dispersed or died as subadults or adults. So we don't know what happened to them. They were gone after that. But the fact that they were in their mom's pod basically for 7 years indicates there's some level of longer term fidelity with them, which is more unusual for males, right? Usually get juveniles and go do your thing. Female calves remained associated as adults or until the mom was not seen again. So they were like sticking.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And what's interesting is that I think maybe even older calves the mom wasn't seen again and the older calves weren't seen again too. Like, what does that mean? Right?
Did they just go somewhere?
They just go somewhere else, or did the mom die and then they died? I don't know. Very interesting though.
I mean, that makes sense if they do prey sharing though, right? Where like if you're sharing prey with your family or your relations, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's like the killer whales where the moms preferentially pick males and the adult males have a very high chance of dying within the next year after their mom dies, even if they're adults.
Yeah.
So, they seems like they have a bit stronger bonds than some of our other fission fusion dolphin species that are more common.
Wow.
So they show that stable long-term groups, and then with males that are hanging out too, and prolonged mother-calf associations have been suggested for this suggests that this paper for this poster, and that this has also been suggested for Brazil and Honduras as early as 1992 and then 2007, respectively.
Wow.
So it's we're pretty sure that we in the royal we, it seems pretty standard that they do have these very strong social structure and relationships. We just still don't know exactly what those are.
Yeah.
But all these different indications between the feeding and what IDs that we do have indicate that there's a lot going on. And I think that it definitely is different than the typical, quote unquote, typical fission fusion society that dolphins have, where you're in groups that constantly change throughout the day, but you have those stronger relationships. But there is some variation in what happens to you as you get older. And if you stay in a pod, like you're one pod your whole life, or in your population your whole life, but you move around within that, so there's it'll be really interesting as we learn more about the species, what that exactly looks like. Is it more like southern resin killer whales where everybody just stays in their pod until they die? Or is it more like that fission fusion, or somewhere in between? Yeah.
Wow. Very cool.
So these are reptilian-looking prehistoric, but not modern.
Modern.
Modern in
That's
their
funny.
ways of cooperatively feeding and doing that, but they look so prehistoric. Anyway, it's a interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so fun facts before we gotta go.
Okay, yeah. So then, let's just wrap up with a couple fun facts about their name. So the species itself was first described by Georges Cuvier in 1823. I'm assuming of Cuvier's beaked whale. Okay. I would assume. And so the
unique name.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm pretty sure if they're studying dolphins and such. Right. So the Latin name is Stenobretonensis, is the Latin name. So steno is coming from the Greek meaning narrow or close, and that is in reference to the long beak, right? And this is actually the only species in the genus Steno bradonensis. So their species name, bradonensis, is in honor of, okay, here we go, Jacob Gisbertus Samuel van Breda, who was a Dutch biologist that studied Cuvier's writings. So apparently he got to name the species, or was the species was named after him, I'm assuming, because he was studying the writings, maybe described it formally or something.
I've never heard that one before, where you're named the guy who studied the guy who found
I know, the guy who first described it. But I wonder if maybe he first described it, but then didn't put it in formal terms or whatever. And so right. Yeah. But I thought that was kind of cool.
That is cool. Get some do there, but that's a whole name there.
Yeah, I was like, okay, here we go. Sorry, anyone who speaks Dutch, I apologize. And on that,
better you have to say it than me, because I'm terrible at it. Cool. Well, that's very interesting. And I know. Okay, so I know it doesn't mean anything, but they're the only one in that genus. It just makes me link more that they're the missing link between river dolphins and rain dolphins.
I mean, I'm they're kind of weird looking.
Putting it out there. Exactly. All right. Well, that is the very cool rough-toothed dolphin. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you've been able to see the picture of them the whole time. But if you're listening to this on whatever device you are, be sure to go check them out, because they are very cool. They're cool looking, but prehistoric, but just interesting. They're interesting.
They're different.
They are different. They are different. All right. So with that, don't forget to head to our website for just different updates and more information. We have our merch there. And again, this is our 10-year anniversary. It'll be in October. So we're going to start having some new merch for that later in the year, and celebrating our 10 years. We've learned a lot about the species that we study here. And we're going to have a paper coming out soon about harbor seals. So stay tuned for that exciting information. And be sure to keep track of us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. And again, reach out if you ever have questions for us or want us to discuss a particular topic. Let us know. The next episode will be on something, a general review or a special topic. So now's your time. Get it in now if you want something to talk about. we have to figure out by next week what we're going to talk about. So reach out and let us know. And thank you all for your support. And we hope you enjoy what we're doing here for you. And if you feel like it, please donate, because all that money goes back to doing our research and providing these opportunities of education for you guys. So with that, we will see you next time.
Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To learn more about the species we discuss, check out our blog. Head to our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM.org, to check it out. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.